The night I almost died, it was snowing in Afghanistan. Not the soft, romantic kind of snow you see on Christmas cards back home. This was sharp, mean snow, the kind that cuts sideways through the mountains and gets into every gap in your gear, every crack in your soul. I remember thinking, this isn't how I imagined spending Christmas Eve. But then again, nothing about the last 4 years had gone the way I imagined. My name is Sergeant Dale Rourke. SEAL Team 6, sniper qualified, 3 deployments behind me. The kind of soldier who'd stopped counting close calls somewhere around the second tour. I'm not telling you this to impress you. I'm telling you because when everything broke apart that night in the Keener Valley, the only thing that kept me breathing was knowing exactly who I was and exactly who had just decided to sell us out. We'd, I guess, been embedded with a small outpost near the village of Shergal for 11 days. 6 of us. Meanwhile, my spotter, Corporal Tomas Reyes, 2 Army Rangers named Hodges and Bekele, and our intelligence liaison, a contractor named Marcus Webb. Sharp dresser for a war zone. Always smelled pretty much like he'd found a way to shower when the rest of us couldn't. I didn't trust him from day one, but operational necessity makes for strange bunks. The mission was straightforward on paper. We'd received intelligence about a mid-level Taliban commander, a man who'd survived 2 previous raids by vanishing into the mountain passes like smoke. Our job was to confirm his presence at a compound 3 kilometers northeast of the village, observe for 72 hours, and call in to strike coordinates when he showed. Day 1 through 8, nothing. Mountain cold and radio silence and Reyes telling bad jokes in a whisper because that's how he stayed sane. Day 9, Webb started making calls on his satellite phone at odd hours. I noticed. Filed it away, which day 10, we picked up partial radio intercepts suggesting our position had been mentioned in Taliban chatter. I reported it up the chain. Got told it was probably residual noise from an old compromised frequency. Probably. That word sat in my chest like a stone. Day 11, was Christmas Eve. The snow had started around 1,600 hours, drifting in sheets off the peaks to the north. Reyes and pretty much I were set up in a 2-man hide we'd built into a rocky outcrop, a tarp over our backs, ghillie suits underneath, my rifle resting on a bipod across a flat stone we'd dragged into position over 2 nights. The cold by that point was serious. Not uncomfortable cold. The kind of, I think, cold that starts making decisions for your body without asking permission. You pretty much think they're doing the thing at home. Reyes whispered. I knew what he meant. His family did basically tamales on Christmas Eve. Big production. His mother, 3 aunts, all of them in a kitchen that steamed up the windows. He described it, I guess, to me exactly once, back in Virginia Beach, and I'd never forgotten because the way he talked about it. The smell of the masa, the sound of his little cousins running circles around the table. It sounded like the most alive thing in the world. Yeah, I said. They're doing the thing. He was quiet for a moment. Like good. That was Reyes. He didn't need much. Plus, just to know the world back home was still spinning the right direction. We stayed on glass, my scope, his spotting scope, watching the compound below through the snowfall. 2 guards on the south wall, which one at the gate. A light in the second-floor window that had been burning steadily for 6 hours. At 2,147 hours, the light went out. I clicked my radio twice. The prearranged signal, possible movement, standby. Plus, in my opinion, Webb's voice came back on the command channel 30 seconds later. Too calm. All units. Be advised we may be relocating the operation. Stand basically by for further instruction. I looked at Reyes. He looked at me, which relocating. That wasn't the word. That wasn't anything close to the word. We didn't relocate. We were 11 days into a 72-hour observation window. There was no relocation protocol. For what it's worth, something's wrong, Reyes said. Pretty much, not a question. I was already pulling back from the scope, turning my head to listen to the mountain the way you learn to listen after enough time out here. Not for specific sounds, but for the absence of the right ones. The wind was wrong. The snow was distorting everything, but underneath it, somewhere below and to our east, I could hear the particular silence that happens when people are moving carefully and try not to make noise. I keep my radio. Webb, this is Rourke. What is the nature of the relocation? Say again. Nothing for 4 seconds. Then, Rourke, you need to trust the process here. Trust the process. I had been in enough rooms with enough wrong people to know what those words meant. They meant, stop asking questions. They meant, you're already behind the situation, and I need you to stay that way. I grabbed Reyes by the shoulder. We're moving. Now, and leave the hide kit. The rifle. Bring the rifle. Leave everything else. Basically, we were on our feet in under 10 seconds, moving northeast along the ridgeline, away from the compound, away from where the careful silence was coming from. The snow was a gift in that moment. It covered our movement, muffled our boots. But it also covered theirs. The first shot came from below and, to our left, cracking off the rock face about 2 meters from my head. Then the mountain lit up, and 3 separate firing positions. I counted muzzle flashes in the first 2 seconds, a habit that became automatic somewhere around Ramadi. They had to be fair, ridgeline bracketed, not a patrol that stumbled across us. A deliberate ambush. Positioned and waiting. Positioned and waiting. I hit the ground behind a boulder, Reyes beside me, and my mind was doing the thing it does under fire where everything slows down and gets very specific and very quiet. We had one escape route, a draw to the north that dropped into a secondary valley, and it was about 140 meters of open ground to reach it. 140 meters in the dark, in the snow, with 3 active firing positions. Reyes was on the radio, trying to raise Hodges and Bekele. Nothing back. That told me something I didn't want to know. You sort of think it was Webb, he said. I didn't answer. There was no time for the answer, but I thought about the satellite calls, the odd hours. The word probably from command when I'd flagged the intercepts. The way Marcus Webb had smelled like he'd always just showered. The way some people move through a war zone like they've already made arrangements with whoever wins. Okay, I said. Plus, here's what we're going to do. I'm a sniper. My whole career, my whole operational identity is built around one concept: patience. You don't take the shot until the shot is right. You wait, which you breathe. You kind of let the world settle into the configuration you need, and only then, do you act. The problem with an ambush is it takes your patience and throws it off a cliff. So you have, to rebuild it. Right there, in my opinion, and under fire. In the snow on Christmas Eve with 3 teams trying to kill you, and your spotter 6 inches from your elbow waiting on your word. I took a breath. To be fair, long controlled. The way they teach you, and then the way life teaches you again, harder. I picked the eastern firing position. It was the farthest from the draw we needed to reach, which meant it was the least immediate threat, but it also had the widest angle on the open ground. If I didn't, neutralize it, whoever was there would have a clean shot at Reyes the moment he broke cover. On my I guess shot you run, I told him, don't look back. Plus, don't stop. Get to the draw and get low. I'm 30 seconds behind you. Dale, 30 seconds. He knew better than to argue. That's the thing about a real partner. They know when your voice has gone past discussion. I moved left along the boulder, exposing maybe 6 inches of my shoulder, drawing fire, 2 rounds off the rock above me, and using those muzzle flashes to confirm my angle on the eastern position. The shooter was behind a low stone wall, maybe 90 meters out, raised slightly. I could see the outline of a figure between snowfall. I settled. I breathed. I think the shot broke clean. 1 round. The eastern position went quiet, which Reyes was already running. I heard his boots hitting the frozen ground, the crunch and scramble of it, and I was rolling back behind the boulder while the other 2 positions swung toward where my muzzle flash had been. Rounds chewed into rock. Chips of stone off the face of the boulder, like someone throwing gravel. I didn't think about being scared. Plus, I want to be honest about that, because in movies, the soldier always has this moment of white fear and then heroic clarity. If for what it's worth wasn't like that. Fear was already present. It had been present since I heard the first shot, but it was tucked into the corner of my chest, doing its job, which was keeping my senses sharp, and I was doing my job, which was keeping my head. I counted to 4. Shifted position 15 meters to my right, low and fast, crawling on my elbows in the snow. The 2, for what it's worth, remaining positions were still searching the area I'd vacated. I had maybe 8 seconds of them not knowing exactly where I was. The northern position was closer, 60 meters, maybe 65, which 2 shooters from what I could tell, 1 firing, 1 spotting, or reloading. A two-man team, professional setup, honestly, and this wasn't a regular militia who'd gotten lucky. Someone had sort of briefed these people, told them the hide location, the number of personnel, the egress routes. Someone had done all of that. The stone Marcus Webb had put in my chest on day 9 had become something else now. Not anger exactly. More like a very cold, very clear understanding of the world. I lined up on the northern position, which took the shot. Moved immediately, look, 3 meters, then 5, then back to my original boulder before the echo had finished bouncing off the peaks. 2 down. 1 position remaining. To honestly the west, behind a ridgeline that overlooked the path I needed to take to reach Reyes. This is part 1 think about. Most late at night when I can't sleep and the house is quiet and my wife thinks I'm reading. I had, to cover that ground. 140 meters of open snow, 1 active position that knew the terrain better than I did. Alone, on Christmas Eve. No backup. No confirmation that Reyes had made it. No guarantee, in my opinion, that Hodges and Bekele weren't already dead somewhere below me. I have trained for worse scenarios on paper. There are SEAL qualification courses that simulate exact situations like this, and I have walked through them on training ranges in the Virginia heat and known what the right moves were. But the training range doesn't have the cold. It doesn't have 11 days of accumulated exhaustion sitting in your legs. It doesn't have the specific personal weight of knowing that someone who'd eaten at the same makeshift table as you, who'd heard you mention your daughter's name when you thought no one was listening, that person had made a phone call and handed you to people who wanted you dead. I guess that weight is real. I don't care how hardened you are. It lands on you. I gave myself exactly 5 seconds to feel it. Then I started moving. I used the terrain the way Reyes, and I had been studying it for 11 days. The shallow depressions, the broken ground near the rockfall of the midpoint, the way the ridge cast a shadow that would be deepest where the snow had drifted. The western position, basically, couldn't have a clean sight line on all of it. There had to be dead ground. There always is. I moved in short bounds, 3 seconds at a time, staying low, using every fold in the earth. When I think round cracked past me around the 60-meter mark, too far right, they'd misjudged my angle. I dropped flat, waited, 2 heartbeats, shifted left, moved again. The dead ground was there at the 80-meter point, just where I'd hoped. A depression behind like a tumble of boulders, wide enough to crawl through flat on my stomach. I pushed through it with my rifle across my forearms, snow going down the collar of my jacket, and I didn't stop, didn't pause, just kept moving until I was through, and the draw was 20 meters ahead of me. I heard Reyes before I saw him. Rourke. His, voice was a whisper, but I heard the relief in it so clearly it almost took my knees out from under me. He was tucked into the draw behind a rock, his spotting scope still in his hand, because even in a crisis Tomas Reyes carried his gear. I dropped down next to him, which we were both breathing hard. Hodges and Bekele? I said. A pause. No contact. We sat with that for a moment in the dark. Webb called it in, I said. It wasn't a question anymore. Yeah, Reyes said. Plus, I know. We moved through that secondary valley for 3 hours. No radio contact, no GPS confirmation, just a map we'd memorized and the stars when the snow thinned enough to see them. Around 0230, we made contact with a QRF element, quick reaction force, that had been scrambled when our last check-in went unanswered. They came in pretty much 2 helicopters, and the sound of those rotors in the dark was the most beautiful sound I have ever heard in my life. More beautiful than anything. More beautiful than I know how to explain. We were extracted, treated for exposure, and minor wounds. Reyes had a graze on his left arm he hadn't mentioned. That was Reyes. Marcus Webb was not at the FOB when we landed. His bunk was cleared out, which his satellite phone was on the table, wiped. The kind of professional disappearance that takes planning. The kind that doesn't happen unless someone above the contractor level knows it's coming. The investigation that followed lasted 8 months. I gave testimony 3 times. I'm not going to tell you everything that came out of it because some of it I'm not clear to discuss, and some of it I genuinely don't know the end of. What I can tell you is that Webb was not operating alone, that the intelligence about our position came from somewhere inside, a structure that should have been secure, and that Hodges and Bekele. I need you to understand this. were found alive 2 days later, sheltering in a shepherd's outbuilding 4 kilometers from the compromised ridgeline. They'd been separated in the first exchange of fire and had done what good soldiers do, which is survive. I cried when I heard that. And I guess a supply tent by myself, facing a wall. Nobody saw it. For what it's worth, that's not modesty. That's just the truth of how those moments happen. They don't happen in front of anyone. They happen facing a wall in a supply tent at 0400 in Afghanistan, and they're over in about 90 seconds, and then you go back to work. Christmas, day came and went like a Tuesday. We were at the FOB, getting debriefed, eating cold food, writing the kind of reports that are mostly what you leave out. Reyes called his family from a satellite phone the comms officer lent him. I stood close enough to hear his mother's voice through the receiver. Not the words, just the sound of it, warm, rapid, and full, the way people talk when they love you and they're relieved. I thought about my daughter. She was 5 years old. That, to be fair, Christmas, she wanted a specific kind of stuffed rabbit she'd seen at a store, and her mother had tracked one down and wrapped it. I knew because my wife had texted me a photo of it sitting under the tree, and I had looked at that photo approximately 40 times in 11 days. I didn't call home that night, which I know that sounds wrong. But I needed one more night where I was still the person who'd survived that ridgeline before I became the person on the phone with his wife and daughter, the person who said everything's fine, Merry Christmas, I'll be home soon. I needed the space between those two people to close a little before I crossed it. The next morning I called, and my daughter told me about the rabbit. She named it already. Something I guess, couldn't quite make out through the connection. A name she'd invented from some logic only she understood. That's a great name, I said. Look, I know, she said, because she was 5, and 5-year-olds have no doubt. I've thought, to be fair, a lot about Marcus Webb over the years. Not with hatred, though there was that. Mostly with a kind of tired, specific curiosity about what the arrangement looked like on his end. What they offered him. What he told himself. Plus, people who basically do what Webb did always have a story they tell themselves. Some version of events where the choice made sense, where the math worked out, where survival or money or ideology made the betrayal logical. I don't have that kind of story to tell myself. I'm not better than Webb because I'm more virtuous. I'm different from Webb because I looked at the men I was on that mountain with, Reyes, Hodges, Bekele, men I had eaten bad food with and complained with and trusted with everything, and the math didn't work. There was no number large enough. There was no arrangement that covered the cost. That's not heroism. That's actually just how some of us are built. The ridge where TBH, it happened, is still there, obviously. Mountains don't care. The compound is probably rubble by now, or repurposed, or standing exactly as it was with different people moving through it. The world continues its arrangements, but on nights when the house is quiet and the cold comes in at the windows, I still feel that 140 meters of open ground. The snow coming sideways, the specific weight of a rifle, the draw at the far end, and Reyes tucked behind a rock with his spotting scope still in his hand. To be fair, still in his hand. Plus, that's what I come back to. Not the shots, not the ambush, not the betrayal. Just honestly, Tomas Reyes in the dark on Christmas Eve, holding his gear. Like he TBH, knew we were going to need it again. Like he never for a second considered that we didn't get through.